Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours worth of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post videos just like this every Sunday night. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Even thinking about retelling this story has made me the most afraid I've ever been in my life. I suppose if I keep it bottled up, I'll go insane. God knows the security company isn't talking. I feel like if I don't warn people, and they go there... Alright, if I'm telling the story, then I'd better back up a bit. It started a little over a month ago. I work for a security firm that guards projects all over the country. I'm sort of a specialist. It seems like if there's some weird stuff happening at a site, I get called in. I'm not sure why. Maybe my ex-military background, or maybe the fact that... Well, we'll get to that. This place up in New England was having some trouble. A local firm was remodeling an old church when workers suddenly started quitting. No one seemed to have a good reason why they didn't want to work there anymore. So guess who got the call to come in and straighten things out? Driving up there gave me the most profound feeling of being alone I've ever had. And mind you, I've sat watching caves, foxholes, ditches, some of the most godforsaken places on the planet, all by my lonesome, and never did I feel as soul-crushingly alone as driving up that little 2-lane road that was the only sign of humanity as the trees seemed to close in on me from every side. As unnerving as that was, it was nothing compared to pulling into the little town where the church was. It was like the nightmare scene from a B horror movie. I guess arriving at night in the middle of a rainstorm didn't help. I pulled in beside the only vehicle I saw and ran inside the hotel that looked like a saloon out of an old western. I barely got the door closed until there was a light and a gun shoved in my face. "Who the hell are you?" said a man from somewhere behind the glare of a flashlight. "Jones," I said, slowly raising my hands. "I was called in to help out with your worker problem." The light lowered, but the gun stayed. "What company do you work for?" "Sentinel Security." I saw the man relax a little, but mostly I was happy that he lowered his gun. In the best of times, a gun in this situation is less than ideal. All kinds of accidents can happen. I've seen many innocent bystanders fall victim to contagious gunfire. The man stepped over to a table and sat. As I looked around the room, I was surprised at how much it looked like a movie set from an old western, right down to the lit lanterns on the tables and hanging from the rafters. He beckoned me over, and I sat across from him. "Judging by the welcome, I'm guessing the workers aren't the only ones who are spooked," I said. He looked at the gun, then laid it on the table. He seemed to be in his 40s or 50s, but there was a tiredness in his eyes. He looked weary and haggard. Truth be told, I'm not even sure a gun would do any good. "Maybe you should tell me when the trouble started." He looked at me, and I could see worry tugging at his eyes. "Your contract's open, right?" I nodded. "Which means you have to finish the job or you don't get paid, right?" I nodded again. He looked me over for a long moment, then sat back, drained his glass of amber-colored liquid, and sighed. "I bought this town a while back," he started. "Recently, with the passing of my wife, I decided I needed to throw myself into a project to keep me busy. I wanted to revitalize this town and turn it into a tourist attraction. I'm sorry for your loss. He nodded in recognition, but never said another word about her. Things were going along smoothly, he said. The buildings you see have all been restored. They look good. You should have seen them when we started, he scoffed. They were falling apart. No one had lived here for years. That's why I was able to buy the whole place for next to nothing. I'm thinking that's not the only reason. Yes, he said as a haunted look passed through his eyes. We saved the church for last because it needed the most work. But once they started remodeling is when things began to happen. Things? It wasn't much at first. Shovels and saws would go missing. Tools would be left in fine order at night, only to be in complete disarray in the morning. For a while, the workers blamed each other, saying there was a prankster among them. But that wasn't the case. Oh, how I wish it was. I waited for a long moment for him to continue. We found the first body shortly after that. He said so quietly I barely heard him. Of a worker? He nodded. Dead? He nodded again. Why didn't you stop everything and leave? Because it was already too late, he said. We had disturbed it. Disturbed what? He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. He shook his head and looked away. For a moment I could swear I saw a tear run down his cheek. I'm sorry, he said, rubbing his palms on his face. Let me take you to your room and we'll discuss this further in the morning. My curiosity wanted him to finish the story, but it seemed like his weariness had been amplified by alcohol. I followed him as he carried the lantern up the stairs to the first door and opened it for me. He handed me the light and told me the bathroom was across the hall if I needed it. I'll be here bright and early in the morning to give you the dollar tour, he said, sounding more like a host. Aren't you staying here tonight? His eyes flashed genuine fear. Not here, he said. I'll be back in the morning. I looked around the comfortable-looking room, trying to decide what was so wrong with it, as he stepped to the door. Oh, by the way, he said, stopping at the doorway. Don't bother with your cell phone. There's no signal up here. I glanced down at my phone, and when I looked up, he was gone. I picked up the lantern and stepped to the doorway, but I didn't hear him leaving. You would have thought someone walking out on a hardwood floor would make some noise, but it was silent. The only noise I heard was the rain pelting against the windows. Since I was already in the hallway, I decided to check out the bathroom. I walked a short distance down the hall and found it to be functional and clean, but nothing extraordinary. While I was there, I used the toilet and washed my hands, then went to my room and got my toiletries kit to brush my teeth. Carrying a lantern around was a little disconcerting. I've had to deal without electricity many times before, but that wasn't what was bothering me. The shadows from the lamp danced all over, giving the impression of others in the room with me. It's strange because I've never had that feeling before. Shadows were always just shadows. I was trained to be cautious of who could be hiding in the shadows, not the shadows themselves. I finished up my bedtime routine and settled into sleep. There wasn't much of anything else to do, so might as well get some rest. One of the things I was taught early on in my career was that anytime you get a chance, rest. You never know when the next chance will come. I laid down on the comfortable bed and did some relaxation exercises. Before I knew it, I was asleep. I woke with a start, not knowing why. It was pitch black in the room. Instead of panicking, I touched my watch to illuminate it and found my phone. Turning on the flashlight and lighting the lamp helped me to get my bearings, but still didn't tell me why I was awake. I sat there for a long moment, then I heard it. There was a loud clanking sound coming from somewhere outside. Sleeping in my clothes when on a job was a habit I'd gotten into when I first started doing private security. Another carryover from the military. I slipped out of bed and into my boots, then strapped on my utility belt and checked to make sure my sidearm was loaded. I turned off the phone's flashlight and grabbed a small utility flashlight from one of the pouches on the belt. For the moment, I holstered the gun and explored with the flashlight. This could be nothing. I didn't want to go in gangbusters just to find some kids playing around or a worker came in early. I double-checked my watch. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Seemed like an odd time for a worker to come in, but stranger things have happened. Working my way down the stairs quietly, I double-checked the bar room. It was empty. Opening the door, I had the strangest feeling that something was wrong. Nothing seemed to be out of place. It had stopped raining, and I stepped out of the street to find a light layer of fog. Looking up and down the street, I heard the noise again. It sounded like it was coming from the direction of the church. Leading with the flashlight, I started in that direction. There seemed to be a slight orange glow coming from inside the building the closer I got. The beam of my flashlight made the air around me glow. It made me feel like I was giving my position away. I fought back the feeling. This was a little town in Vermont, not an active war zone. I had to be cautious, but also temper it with non-lethal actions. The church loomed in front of me. It seemed much larger up close. I climbed the steps and reached for the doorknob when a loud crack sounded behind me. I whipped around, shining my flashlight at everything, but there was nothing there. As I was looking back, I noticed a light in the window of my room. I must have left the lantern lit. As I looked, I saw the light dim for an instant and then got brighter, almost as if someone had walked in front of it. The temperature felt like it was in the lower 70s, but that didn't keep a chill from running down my spine. Someone was curious to know who I was. From years of experience, found that it's never good if someone wants to find out who you are, but doesn't want to do it face to face. That would be something to deal with when I got back to my room. For now, there was a church to explore. I got the feeling that someone was trying to distract me from entering the church. I reached the top of the stairs and turned the knob, but nothing happened. It didn't feel like it was locked. It was almost as if someone was on the other side, holding the knob. I turned as hard as I could, and it finally gave and the door opened, dragging me inside and nearly knocking me to the floor. Regaining my balance, my hand hovered over my gun, expecting to see someone doing something they weren't supposed to. As I slowly panned around the room, I found something much worse. Absolutely nothing. There was a lit lantern set up on a table near the altar that was in the middle of being restored. Other than that, there were a lot of pews that were halfway constructed. The ones that were finished looked like they had been sanded and were waiting for a layer of stain. I walked down the center aisle as if looking for a seat at a wedding or a funeral. As I approached the partially reconstructed pulpit, I looked up and saw a life-size wooden carving of Jesus on the cross. It looked old, not like wine that ages well, but like decrepit. It had been painted fresh colors at one time, but now it was cracked and peeling away from the carving. It looked grotesque to see the layers of skin peeling away like it was rotting off his body. I'm not the most religious man, but I believe in Jesus. I've prayed enough prayers sitting in foxholes and caves, asking to be rescued from bad situations, and I'm still here. I wouldn't call him and I best buds. I know our relationship could be closer, but seeing him that way, rotting to pieces, was just disturbing. As I looked into his face, I swore I saw his eyes open for an instant. I blinked my own eyes to be sure I was seeing right, but when I looked again, they were closed. It was my imagination playing tricks on me. At least that's what I told myself as I stepped onto the platform and looked around. Off to each side were doors. I went to the one to the right and found a small broom closet. The one on the left held a set of stairs that went down and disappeared into darkness. Just inside the door, there was yellow and black caution tape blocking the way down. I shone the light on the stairs and they looked sturdy enough. I reached for the tape, but before I got a hold of it, a strong hand grabbed my shoulder and turned me around. "What do you think you're doing?" said a man who was a full foot shorter than me, but his grip felt like iron. "I was about to go down those stairs," I said. He looked at me with the incredulous look a parent gave a toddler who was reaching for a hot stove. "And you didn't see the caution tape?" he said. "I saw it." "Who are you anyway? I've never seen you before." "Jones," I said, offering my hand. "I'm with Sentinel Security. I was called to investigate why workers keep quitting." He looked at my hand, then at me. "So this investigation includes ignoring obvious warnings?" My hand was still extended, but had yet to be shaken. I let it fall back to my side. "Are you a worker or a foreman?" He scoffed. "Nothing so formal. I make sure people do what needs to be done." "So, foreman?" His eyes bled with suspicion as he stared at me. "Where did you say you were from again?" As I was about to answer, more workers entered, followed by the owner I'd met last night. "Let's ask the boss if he knows you," the foreman said smugly. The owner locked eyes with me and gave me the strangest look as he walked up to us. "Good morning," he said, addressing both of us. "Good morning, sir," the foreman said. "I caught this man snooping around in here." "Did you know?" he said. "Is that true?" "I wasn't snooping. I was investigating," I said. "Don't you remember our conversation last night?" His eyes opened a hair wider for an instant, then went back to normal. "Of course I do," he said with a smile that seemed forced. "Remind me again. My memory isn't the best." "We met in the saloon, talked for a little bit, and then you showed me to my room." "Indeed?" he said with a raised eyebrow. "Did I say anything else?" "You told me you bought this place after your wife passed away, and problems started after you found the first dead worker." "Dead?" the foreman said with alarm. "When did this happen?" The owner burst into laughter. "It appears Mr. Jones here has pulled a fast one on you," he said to the foreman. "Perhaps he and I should go and discuss the matter in private, and you can continue with your work." The owner grabbed my arm and guided me away from the foreman, whose eyes burned as they followed us out the door. We walked out of the church in silence, as he nodded to workers who were straggling in to start for the day. He led me back to the saloon, and we sat at the same table as before. "So you and I met in this saloon last night?" he said. "At this very table," I said. "I came to the door and you pulled a gun on me." His eyebrows raised. "Did I know? And what time was this?" "I'd say around 9. We sat here and talked about what was going on with the workers." "And what else did I say? Other than about the worker?" "I asked why you hadn't left, and you said it was too late." This time he didn't try to hide it. His eyes grew wide. He stared at me for a long moment, then seemed to gather himself. "I apologize, Mr. Jones, if this all seems a little strange," he said. "You and I did not have a conversation last night." It was my turn to raise my eyebrows. "At 9 o'clock last night, I was in bed with my very much alive wife. But you said, and we have not had any workers die. I don't understand. Neither do I. I thought about it for a long moment. You were drinking when you talked to me. Is it possible you were too drunk to remember? He leaned a little closer. I haven't had a drink in 19 years. He reached into his pocket and set a coin on the table. I picked it up and looked at it. It was an AA coin. Then, who did I talk to last night? He put the coin back in his pocket. Are you sure it was me who was drinking? I looked up at him and read suspicion in his eyes. I don't drink. He leaned back in his chair. It seems we've reached an impasse, he said. Perhaps I should call your company and have a different person come and investigate the matter. I wanted to find out what was going on. Perhaps you should give me at least a day to investigate, I said. Unless there's some other reason you don't want me to get to the bottom of this. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Please continue your investigation, Mr. Jones, he said. Unimpeded? I will inform the foreman to allow you free rein. Thank you, I said, standing to leave. Just one more thing, he said. What was the last part of what my doppelganger told you? You said it was too late to leave because you had disturbed something. His eyes fell to the table as if in deep thought. I went back to the church and began talking to the workers one by one. Each of them was hesitant to talk around the foreman, but once they were out of earshot, told very similar stories. There had been strange things going on, especially at night. It was more than just tools being moved around. Strange symbols would appear carved into the wood they were using. The owner would tell them to cut the symbols out and use whatever they could of the wood. One of the workers had gone missing, but after a day or so, the owner said he had quit. The strange thing was, no one was able to contact him after that. The more I dug, the more I found. Some of the workers had become curious as to why they were restoring this town in the middle of nowhere. It turned out it had been long suspected that satanic rituals were carried out in this very church. It was also suspected to be the site of one of the earliest witch burnings. But the two facts that stuck out in my mind were no one hung around after dark. That was when things were alleged to get strange. And no one was allowed down the steps I had found before the foreman stopped me. The workers had been told the steps were unsafe and could collapse under the weight of a person. It didn't take much convincing to keep them away from the creepy stairs. By afternoon, I knew exactly what my next move was. I went back to my room and checked around to see if anything was missing. Nothing seemed to be, so I set my watch and took a nap. The alarm went off at 9 o'clock. I went to the bathroom to splash some water on my face, then geared up for my expedition. When I got to the church, it was empty. I made a beeline for the left door and the creepy staircase. With flashlights attached to a headband and my waistband, I was good to go to keep my hands free for whatever I might need them for. I attached a safety rope, like mountain climbers do, and found a sturdy spot to anchor it into the wall. If the stairs give out on me, at least I wouldn't fall. As advertised, every stair creaked like it was about to give out, but thankfully, none of them did. The trip down was an assault on the senses. The damp, musty smell of rotting wood and general decay was nearly overwhelming. I was surprised at the general lack of cobwebs. It told me this area wasn't quite as off limits as some had let on. Surprisingly, the bottom didn't open up into a full basement. There were a few wooden shelves at the base of the stairs, but they were empty. Instead, it became a narrow passageway. The floor was made of dirt, and the walls were the same stone of the foundation of the church was made from. It seemed whoever had built this tunnel built at the same time as the church. The ceilings barely made it to 6 feet. I had to duck to keep from brushing my head against it. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but this was the key to discovering what was happening here. I'd been walking for 10 minutes, senses alert, hand on my holstered sidearm. Suddenly the air changed. The smell became more pungent and the air warmer. There was a feeling of closing in that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned a corner, and the tunnel opened up into a large room with a high ceiling. I panned around trying to get the scope of the room when my light fell on something big in the corner. It looked like a massive black boulder that was made of leather. Watching, transfixed, I noticed it was moving. Not much, but just a bit, rising and falling. I realized it was breathing. Fear gripped me. I no longer had any interest in finding out what was going on here. I just wanted to turn and slowly back away. The thing made a noise. It was either a snort or a cough, but in either case, it seemed to be waking up. I doused my lights and stayed as still as possible while listening in to the total darkness. Its breathing became louder and less steady. I heard a creaking that sounded like bones when someone stretched. It was getting up, and I was standing in the middle of the tunnel. If by some miracle it didn't already know I was here, as soon as it walked over here, it would run right into me. My mind raced to come up with options as I heard footsteps coming closer. I backed up against the wall and started edging to the left, hoping I was in the main room and not still in the tunnel. The footsteps were so close when they suddenly stopped. The absence of sound was deafening. I tried to hold my breath as I listened to the beast's breathing. It was slow and sporadic, as if it was listening for me. Neither of us moved. We barely breathed, each waiting for the other to reveal their location. My hand drifted to the gun as I tried to pull it out of the holster as quietly as possible. The air shifted. The beast had moved, but I didn't know where. I heard a strange squelching sound and then... "What are you doing, Mr. Jones?" I tried to hold off as long as possible, but curiosity got the best of me. I turned on my headlamp to find the owner standing right in front of me, staring at me with a maddening smile. My eyes darted around looking for the beast, but knew I wouldn't find it. It was standing in front of me. "So, are you the real thing?" I said, hoping to keep the panic out of my voice. "Or are you some shapeshifter who pretends to be someone else because he has no identity of his own?" "I'm whoever I want to be," he said. I heard the squelching again, only this time I had the displeasure of watching it happen. His entire body rippled and tore itself apart, only to reform into the beast for a moment, then tear apart again and reform into something much more terrifying. I gasped, looking into my own eyes. "You see," he said in my voice, "I can take your place and travel around pretending to solve problems." While he was changing, I glanced around to see if there was anything else in the room I could use. In the far corner, I saw what looked like a nest and an inverted cross hanging on the wall. "If you could, why haven't you?" I said, playing at a hunch. "What? If you were free to go anywhere, then why haven't you? Why sit here in the middle of the woods with nothing to do?" "I choose to stay here," he said in my voice. "You choose because this is where your power is. You know so little. I'm rebuilding this place so my worshippers can live here and pray to me, giving me all the power I need. Just like when this place was first built. And until my followers thrive, I survive off of human sacrifice." "So did you kill the worker?" "And no one remembers him, just like they won't remember you." He grinned and took a step toward me, but I drew my pistol and shot him in the forehead. He fell to the ground, bleeding. It was a strange sight to watch myself die, but then the squelching began again, and he reformed into his demonic form. He stood 10 feet tall and covered in leathery skin that looked like tiny teeth. His face was a nightmare of glowing red eyes and massive sharp teeth. He roared at me in what sounded like 1,000 voices. I turned and ran down the tunnel, ducking so I didn't hit my head and knock myself out. That would have ended my escape and my life. I heard the squelching again and heard my voice call after me. "You can't escape, and besides, I know how to find you." I turned and fired, hitting him in the chest. He dropped and squelched again. I wanted to watch him turn into his demon form to see him squashed into the tunnel that was too small for him, but I didn't dare squander this time for anything but escape. It seemed like forever until I came to the stairs. I took them 2 at a time. Once I reached the top, I turned to see him at the bottom. I shot him again, then found a lantern inside the church, lit it, and tossed it down the stairs. The glass shattered, spreading fire all over the bottom stairs. They began to burn almost immediately. I could hear his desperate cries as the flames crawled up the stairs, destroying them one by one. Turning and running out the doors, I didn't bother with my things in my room. I hopped in my car and drove like a bat out of, well, you know. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I glanced in my rearview mirror, hoping I wouldn't see that thing chasing me. Instead, I saw a glow growing in the forest behind me. I prayed the whole church was on fire, and it would spread to all the houses. I only wished his followers were in the house when they burned. I wondered how many places there were, just like this, in the world. Not to brag or anything, but I'm an exceptional human being. Not only am I intelligent, I'm also handsome, charismatic, and humble. So, to think this horrifying incident would happen to such a great guy like myself honestly shocks me. My story begins in the summer of 2022. I just finished my sophomore year at one of the top universities in the country. I had a girlfriend named Alexis. Her family was poor. She could only afford to go to a community college. She also had to work part-time at a fast food restaurant. This is where I met her. Stupid girl, but she was hot. Also, she was very quiet and reserved. So she had some positives. I planned on upgrading from her after I got my degree. The only other friend I really had was my college roommate, Troy. He was a complete dork. He was really into ghosts, demons, and other superstitious stuff. His family was incredibly wealthy. He would show me pictures of his mansion. He would say some really weird stuff like there's a demon living in the mansion, that it lives in the basement but comes upstairs at night and bangs on his bedroom door all night long. He says he never leaves his bedroom at night because the demon kidnapped his grandfather. Anyway, I had 2 weeks until I started a summer internship. I wanted to spend time with Alexis, but she seemed to be getting bored with me. I then thought of an idea. I remembered Troy saying that he was taking a trip with his family to Japan the whole summer. The mansion would be completely empty. I could take Alexis to the empty mansion and impress her by saying it's mine. When Troy took a shower, I rummaged through all his stuff and eventually found the key to the mansion in his coat pocket. I wasn't stealing it, just borrowing it for the summer. The next day, I took her to the mansion. I started giving her a tour. At one point during the tour, I thought I heard a noise coming from the basement. Sounded like someone moaning. It's probably my imagination, I thought to myself. After I gave her the tour, I asked, "So, what do you think?" She gave me a smile and disinterested look. "It's nice." Her disinterest annoyed me. She lived in a bad neighborhood. Here I am, wasting all my time showing her a proper house, and she has the audacity to show disinterest? Anyway, we decided to spend the night there. We watched Netflix all night long and fell asleep on the couch. I woke up around 2 a.m. For some reason, I felt uneasy, like someone was watching me. I was still half asleep, but I started making out a dark figure standing across from me on the couch. "Alexis?" I asked. But then I looked to my right. She was still sleeping next to me. "Troy? No, he should be in Japan." My eyes started to adjust. The dark figure was humanoid in shape, but at the same time it was obviously not human. It was skinny, around 8 feet tall. Its arms and legs were disproportionately long compared to the rest of its body. The figure started making a moaning noise, the same one I heard in the basement earlier that day. Alexis woke up from that noise. It's then that I realized that this was probably the demon Troy was talking about. I thought it was complete BS, but here it was, right in front of us. "What's wrong?" I heard Alexis ask me, but I was still fixated on the demon. Alexis followed my eyes and screamed with terror when she saw the demon. The demon started walking towards us. I shoved Alexis at the demon to distract it. I then sprinted for the exit. However, the mansion was so big and it was pitch black that I didn't know where I was going. I just continued to run, hoping I could find the exit. I eventually tripped and fell over. I started to feel sorry for myself. Why was this happening to someone as exceptional as me? Why not Troy? Dude's a loser. Or heck, it could be anyone. Why was this happening to me? I started crying and accepted my fate. A few seconds later, I felt a hard slap on my face. I looked up. It was Alexis. "You," she wailed. "You were going to let that thing kill me so you could get away." I was astonished by what she was saying. She never acted this way. She was always very reserved and polite, and she just physically assaulted me. I was furious that she would treat me this way, but I regained my composure. "I demand an explanation. How did you get away?" She looked enraged. "That's what you ask me? Not that you're glad that I survived, or how I'm doing after you left me to die?" "You're exaggerating. I didn't leave you to die," I retorted. "And it's not like you contribute anything relevant to society like me." She looked at me with disgust and said, "That's it. I'm done with you," and started walking away from me. This completely caught me off guard. Why was she being so selfish? I'm destined for greatness. She is a community college student, destined for mediocrity. My future is much more important than hers. She should be putting all of her effort into making sure I survive. But here she is, walking away from me. "What, you think you can escape without me?" I said mockingly. "We both know you're too stupid to survive without me. You need me." She continued to walk away without a word. "Fine. I don't need her anyway," I thought to myself. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness. I started to realize that I was near the kitchen. The kitchen has a window. I can escape through the window. I started feeling my way through the darkness until I reached the kitchen. I tried to unlock the window without success. Looking around, I found a pot on the kitchen table. I used it to break the window. I grinned. Sweet freedom. She should have stuck with me. I started to crawl through the window to the outside. I was almost all the way out when something grabbed my right leg. It was the demon. It was pulling me back inside. I was wiggling my leg, trying to get my leg loose, but the demon's grasp was too strong. The demon was slowly pulling me back into the mansion. To my bewilderment, I saw Alexis. She was already outside and she was walking away from the mansion. Alexis! Alexis! I screamed again and again as the demon was slowly pulling me back inside, but she couldn't hear me. Alexis! I cried. My whole body was back in the mansion now. The demon dragged me through the pitch darkness. I cried in horror. What was it going to do to me? I started to realize that it was taking me downstairs. It was taking me to the basement. 2 years later, I'm still trapped in the basement. The only company I have is the demon and Troy's grandfather, who was also kidnapped. Turns out the demon is lonely, and that's why it kidnapped the both of us. The demon has a laptop, so that's how I'm posting my story here. I sometimes go on Alexis's social media. Turns out she now transferred to MIT and is doing very well for herself. As for me, I'm bored to death. All I do is play Monopoly with the demon and Troy's grandfather and surf the web. How could this happen to me? I had such a bright future. Everyone feels lonely sometimes. For me, last night struck a little harder than usual. I'm not sure why it did, but it led me to downloading Tinder. When irrational thoughts get to you, you start to think of irrational solutions to your problems. I figured I would get on Tinder and swipe the night away, as it seemed like the easiest way to fix my problem. I have always believed that dating apps aren't made to pair you with a potential lover, but rather to make you feel insecure, so you spend more time on the app. Because of this, I was surprised to find a girl called Jessica who had liked me back within 10 minutes of me using the app. I felt like she was fake at first, but I'd rather find out than contemplate about the possibility, so I texted her. She responded within a few minutes, and we started talking. What felt like minutes of talking had turned into hours. When I looked at the time, I was surprised to see that it was 1 a.m., so I told her that I had to sleep because I had to wake up early for work in the morning, but that I'd love to text with her again. She replied, "Oh, yeah, no problem. If you give me your phone number, we can get off the app." And then she added a smiley face. Without hesitation, I gave her my phone number and went to sleep. I woke up and started the day as I usually do. I ate breakfast, took a shower, brushed my teeth, and got on my way to work. I've worked for a newspaper for over 5 years, where I get to write about all types of things. Today I had to write about a man who went missing not too far from where I live. He was 2 years younger than me and lived alone. It's been 2 weeks since his disappearance, and the local authorities decided to use the newspaper in hopes someone would have more information. As I was finishing up the story about the missing person, I got a text message from the girl. She asked me how work was and if I had anything to do that evening. I caught myself smiling at the text message and ridiculed myself for already being head over heels for this girl, despite not having met her in person. I always tend to get attached to people too quickly, which is usually why my relationships don't go as I would like them. Because of this, I cursed my mind for feeling this way. I waited a few minutes before answering her text, because I felt like it would make me seem more mysterious and busier than I actually am. I'm not sure why, but I figured it would be better than replying within 5 seconds. "Yeah, I'm free. Getting off from work soon. What do you have in mind?" I sent the message and went back to finish the news article. Once I had finished it, I sent it to my boss for confirmation and left work for the day. When I looked at my phone, she replied to my message. "How about you come over to my place for an hour? We can chat and have some fun." Without hesitation, I quickly opened the chat and replied, completely disregarding my previous strategy. "That sounds great. I'll be on my way soon. A few minutes after that, she sent me her address, which was not far from where I lived. It's about a 15-minute walk. As I made my way to her house, I was imagining all the possible situations that might occur, any conversations we might have, and what the best responses would be. I arrived at her house 10 minutes earlier than she said, but being early is usually considered a good thing. I knocked on the door of her house and waited for a little bit but got no response. I grabbed my phone and told her I was at her house. While waiting for a response, I decided to look around the house to see if maybe I could see her through one of the windows. I made my way to the back of her house and quickly found myself standing in the garden. Standing in the garden, I immediately noticed something odd. It seemed like she had done some digging a few days ago. I figured she had tiles in her garden which she decided to remove. Before I had the chance to think about it any longer, I heard her voice yell at me from a window above me. "Oh hey, you're already here. Let me open the door." I waved at her awkwardly and was startled by her sudden appearance. I quickly regained my composure and made my way back to the front door, where I was met with her beautiful smile and a gesture for me to come in. "You want something to drink?" she asked. Some water would be great, thanks," I replied awkwardly. I forgot how shy I can get around people when it's not over text. It's a whole different experience for me. I could tell she picked up on it. And she was amazing when it came to talking to people, because she managed to make me feel at ease quickly. She handed me my drink, and we started talking like we had the night before, the only difference being that this was face to face. After talking for a bit, I asked her if I could use the bathroom. "There's one right down the hall," she said, pointing to the general direction. I stood up and made my way to where she was pointing. The bathroom seemed to have been recently cleaned, and the smell of bleach was more than noticeable. But other than bleach, I could also smell something else. Something rotten. I made my way back to the living room and said, "Hey, I think some animal might have died near your bathroom." As I turned the corner and looked at where I last saw her, I was met with nothing. I also did not get a response, so I called out her name. "Jessica?" There was a brief pause, but then she replied, "I'm in the kitchen making snacks." Something about the way she said it made me feel uneasy. I can't explain why, but perhaps it's because of all the stories I've heard online about this type of thing. I slowly made my way to the kitchen, peeking my head around the corner, and what I saw left me stunned. She had smeared blood under her eyes, and was holding a kitchen knife in her right hand. Though I felt unable to process the situation I found myself in, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and I ran to the front door to open it, only to find it locked. "What's the matter? I thought you wanted to have fun," she said in a playful voice. In a frenzy, I ran upstairs and desperately tried to open any of the windows, only to find out that she had locked all of them. I heard her make her way upstairs, giggling and singing. I cursed myself for being so careless. I should have known better to meet in a public place. I tried to think of any way out of this situation, which was when I realized the window she had yelled through might still be open. Maybe I could use that window to get out. I quickly ran to the side of the house where the window was to push my luck. To my surprise, the window opened, and I saw my chance to escape. I could hear her yelling no as she was inches away and running towards me. Realizing I had no time to hesitate, I jumped out of the window and landed on my back. Though the fall was painful, I was still able to get myself on my feet. I ran to her neighbor's house and frantically knocked on the door. An older couple opened the door and seemed rightfully confused by my frantic look, but realized I needed help, so they let me in. They allowed me to use their phone to call the police and offered me a cup of tea to recover from what had happened, which I explained to them. This was when the pain in my back started to become worse, as the adrenaline in my body was slowly becoming less and less. Within 10 minutes, I heard police cars outside. One of the policemen knocked on the door and asked me what had exactly happened. While I was explaining to him everything that had happened, the other cops kicked the door in after Jessica did not open the door. A few minutes later, the cops came out of the house with her laptop, a blood-filled bottle, and a cup of fingernails. The only thing that seemed to be missing was Jessica. She probably left as soon as she realized I would call the cops. I got the medical attention I needed, and was offered a drive back to my house by one of the policemen. I was completely exhausted and fell asleep within a few minutes. I took some days off from work to recover from what had happened, because I felt like I needed some rest. A couple of days later, I learned that Jessica had been a part of an online cult which seemed to worship Satan. I had also found out that I wasn't her first victim. The man I had written about in the newspapers, who had gone missing, had been found buried in her garden. After some DNA tests, they confirmed that the blood and fingernails they found were his. I have deleted Tinder since then, and decided to never download it again. There's still no information about where Jessica is, but I'm glad I never gave her my address. Upon my father and I moving into our new house, I was searching around the attic, as we were going to clear it out and make it my new room. I really enjoyed the idea of having this attic as a bedroom. I would have 2 windows, one in the front, the other in the back. I would be able to look down over the entire front and backyard in just a few steps. I know this isn't something most people would be necessarily excited for, but I was 13 and thought it was really cool. I examined the uncleared room, imagining where I would keep all my furniture, but this was kind of difficult to do with all of the boxes and debris in the way. It was a small rural home in Colorado that had been abandoned for some reason many years prior. While my father was occupied moving our own old furniture from the moving truck, I opted to begin cleaning out the attic. After all, I was a teenager now. I could absolutely clean out the entire thing by myself. I was wrong. I decided I would have to get all the boxes down and emptied out first, before getting my dad to help me move the old shelves and such. I began excitedly rifling through the boxes to see if there was anything worth keeping, like old Pokemon cards or something. To my dismay, none of it was really that interesting, mostly just seasonal decorations. I had gone through nearly every box in about an hour when something finally caught my eye. A tape. It was extremely dusted and whatever was written on it had been scribbled out. I imagined it must be something spooky and thought I would watch it when we got my room set up. I tucked it into my bag with all of my personal belongings and made my way down to help my dad finish unloading the truck. After a few days living there, I was able to deduct that something felt strange about the house. I liked my room though, so I was being optimistic about it. The age of the house became apparent, with chipped and scratched paint covering the walls, and the structure settled frequently. I believed I could get used to it though. The worn paint, while a noticeable flaw, seemed to be an easy fix through a simple application of fresh coats. I had entirely forgotten about the tape at this point, as I was more focused on helping my dad tidy up the downstairs areas. It was a cheap home, given that it was abandoned and had a ton of old furniture in it. I never understood why the previous owners would abandon the home without any of their belongings. After about a week and a half of cleaning, and moving the downstairs was finally looking like a sustainable living area. Now it was time for my room, which my father told me we would work on the next day. I was upset about this, but understood. We'd been working for almost 2 weeks. We didn't have a lot of money, so we just cleared everything out on our own. Those freshly painted walls would more than likely have to wait a while. The next day, we finished preparing my room and began getting my books, DVDs, and games out of boxes. I sat the tape on my bookshelf with everything else, not thinking much about it yet. I was more excited to take a break and finally play my Xbox again, and so came my first night sleeping in my new bedroom. My bed had been placed next to the window near the front of the house. I was enjoying being able to look down at the cars driving by on the highway, identifying which of them had mean faces and which of them had nice faces. On the other side of the road was another house, a much nicer one than ours. It was also probably the only other house for a few miles. I could tell someone lived there. There were 2 cars parked outside of it. I just hadn't ever seen anyone come out to this point. That was strange to me as well, but I brushed it off as nothing. This was around the time COVID was dying down, but quarantine still lasted 2 weeks. So, this was more than likely the cause. I stopped thinking about it for the night, and continued to judge the cars until I fell asleep. The next day I awoke to the smell of bacon and quickly made my way downstairs. I loved bacon. My dad would cook it every Saturday morning. We could always eat it and watch TV together as a family when my mom was still alive. We kept up that tradition even now. He and I would watch whatever cartoons were on in the morning. "Hey kiddo, you sleep alright?" His smile radiated towards me. "Yeah, I really like my new room." I watched his smile with an even bigger one. I loved my dad. He was a really great guy. While I didn't share most of his outdoorsy interests, we were both big nerds. Before we moved, he would take me out to the theater every month or so to watch remasters of old horror films. I thought maybe at this time I should tell him about the tape, but I decided not to. I was very intrigued by it, and I didn't think he would want me to watch a mysterious tape. Reasonably so, in my opinion. But I was very eager. I would just have to wait for him to leave the house for a prolonged amount of time so I could get to the VCR from his closet. I had no idea when that day would come, but I was excited. "What you thinking about, bud?" I was clearly deep in thought. I didn't mean to make it so obvious. "Oh, nothing. I'm sorry. I was just concentrated on the TV." I lied. He nodded, putting another piece of bacon into his mouth. "Have you met the neighbors yet?" He said, slightly muffled by his hand while he chewed his bacon. "No, I haven't even been sure anyone actually lives there. I haven't seen anyone out in a couple weeks." "Well, why don't me and you go introduce ourselves after breakfast? Maybe they'll have a kid your age." "Okay, that sounds great actually." This filled me with hope. I had a few friends growing up, just never any close ones. I was always considered extremely optimistic and warm, however, I was anything but an extrovert. A neighboring child my age would be the perfect candidate for a new friend. This could be a fresh start. An hour passed, we both took showers and got dressed presentably, and made our way across the road with a large plate of leftover bacon. I stood behind my father as he knocked on the door. We heard footsteps from inside getting closer until the door eventually opened. "Hello?" The man pushed the door open to a crack while my father introduced us. "Hello, I'm Martin and this is my son Ezra. We're your new neighbors." He held the plate out, smiling. The man pushed the door open with an equally polite smile. "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Marvin." It was a short, stubby man. He had a big bushy mustache and his head seemed to be balding. There was a sign behind him on their wall that read, Ellsworth. I assumed this was his last name. I stuck up my hand shyly in a wave. He looked over my father's shoulder at me. "Hello, Ezra. I'm Mr. Ellsworth. It's very nice to meet you." This confirmed my theory about his last name. He stuck out his hand, prompting me to shake it. "Nice to meet you too." I shook his hand. It felt very calloused. Then a woman appeared behind the man, similar in appearance. "Oh, and this is my wife, Harriet. Come in, come in." He waved his arms inwards, encouraging us to enter. We followed. My father placed a plate of bacon on their kitchen table, and conversation between the three of them ensued. I didn't contribute anything to the conversation, nor did I mean to stare, but I did. Eventually a girl entered the kitchen. She looked to be my age. I got excited but still said nothing until Mr. Ellsworth broke my silence. "This is my daughter Gia. Why don't you go show our guest around the house?" Gia agreed, and I started following her up the stairs. She was very pretty. She had long blonde hair and blue eyes, nothing like either of her parents. They both had black hair. I couldn't manage to break the silence. I didn't know exactly what to say. I was nervous. We continued walking until we reached her room. She sat on her bed while I stood awkwardly beside the door, still silent. I was messing it up, and I knew it. It felt awful. She broke the silence. "So, what's your name?" She asked us curiously. "I'm Ezra. I moved here from Wisconsin." "What made you move all the way out here? That's really far." It seemed like she was having a hard time speaking to me the same way I was with her. "It was just cheap. We aren't the most financially stable family. What kind of things do you do for fun around here?" I was attempting to break the awkwardness. She began to list off her hobbies. We actually had a lot in common. We shared a favorite movie, Saw. We began talking and laughing together as if we had been friends our entire life. It felt like hours had gone by when Mr. Ellsworth and my father walked upstairs and informed me it was time to head back home. It had only been 30 minutes. I waved goodbye to her with a smile, and she reciprocated. I was very happy. I made a friend. About a week had gone by. Gia and I were hanging out frequently now, both at my house and hers. My dad had gotten a job. It was still summer. Things were great. When I was with Gia, I had entirely forgotten about the tape. I had a crush on her at this point. Although we were young, I knew I liked her a lot. I think my dad picked up on this. He would tease me about it pretty often. Gia ended up going on a family vacation the following week. They'd be gone for a few days. This is when things began to become increasingly strange. One night I had woken up to the sound of the house settling, and it just wouldn't really stop for a few seconds. But this wasn't even the weird part. I was hearing something else. Footsteps. I originally brushed this off and tilted over, trying to go back to sleep, but then something caught my attention. It wasn't just one set of footsteps. I heard this going on for about 15 minutes until it eventually stopped. I thought I had just imagined it and fell back asleep. It was a warm Friday morning. I woke up expecting to hear my dad walking around, but there was nothing. He was probably watching TV. I got up and walked downstairs. There was a note on the table. I quickly realized he wasn't home, so I decided to read the note. It said, "Hey kiddo, sorry I left so abruptly. I didn't want to wake you up. I had to leave early. I got called in for a very short notice business trip. There's plenty of food in the fridge, so keep yourself well fed while I'm gone. Mr. Ellsworth has offered to burn some of those leftover boxes and furniture from when we first moved, so please set them out front for him to collect them when his family gets back home. I love you, Dad." I was kind of sad I didn't get to see him before he left, but it was okay. I could manage. I went out and started moving our boxes from the garage to the front of the yard. About halfway through moving all the boxes, I remembered the tape. This made my work rate increasingly quick, as I knew I could watch the tape without being caught now. I had completely forgot, and my curiosity piqued again. When I got inside, I basically sprinted for my dad's room and grabbed the VCR from his closet, went upstairs and plugged it into my TV. I picked up the dusty tape from the bookshelf and blew off any dust before carefully pushing it into the VCR. The tape began rolling, and I became increasingly disappointed as I realized it was just footage of someone walking through the woods for what seemed to be 5 minutes. The person filming was whispering something, but it sounded like gibberish. Towards the end of the tape, whoever was recording the tape's pace sped up, and a building came into frame as the tape ended, but it was too blurry to make out exactly what it was. It was pretty weird. It just didn't meet my expectations of a spooky tape. I kept watching the tape over the course of the next few days. I was just still curious as to what it was on the tape. I was failing to make any type of connection, so I gave up. Everything was pretty normal other than the tape. A few days passed and I saw a vehicle pull into the Ellsworth's driveway. They were home. I finally had someone to talk to again. Gia was home. But first I had to assist Mr. Ellsworth with transporting the boxes over to his backyard so he could burn them. This took a long time, but eventually we got it done. Before I knew it, it was 9 p.m. I didn't have time to talk to Gia today, even if I wanted to. So I just thanked Mr. Ellsworth, told him good night, and went back home. My dad would be home a few days later too, so I was pretty happy about that. Except, he never returned. A day became 2, 2 days became 3, and I was now increasingly worried. I had stopped talking to Gia, I was so anxious. Then something came in the mail for me. I hoped it was a letter. I didn't have a phone with service, so this was the only way I'd be able to communicate with my dad. It wasn't. It was another tape. I didn't even want to watch it. I was still too concerned about my dad. This tape was also scribbled out, and looked to be pretty old. My curiosity finally got the best of me and I put the tape in. It began to roll. A man walked into the frame this time. He sat down at a table, then I realized this was my house. The man, very distressed, began to speak. "If you manage to get a hold of this tape, you need to get out of that house. The people across the street, they kill people. They mutilate them and do horrible things with the parts. I'm about to contact the authorities as soon as I finish this recording. While my mom was over to visit, she mysteriously disappeared. I never knew why." He paused for about 15 seconds and took a deep breath. "I was over at their house a couple hours ago. I was looking for them because they had gone downstairs. I was just going to let them know I was about to leave. I found a finger while I was down there. It had my mother's wedding ring. There were several boxes. They know. They have been trying to scare me before they kill me. They're making me record this to play with me before they kill me." He broke out into tears. A much younger Mr. Ellsworth walked into frame behind the man, and the tape ended. I was horrified. I didn't know what to do. Was this why my dad never arrived home? Boxes. Like the boxes my father had asked me to give Mr. Ellsworth in his letter. The footsteps I heard a couple weeks ago that I brushed off as nothing. The first tape. Was the building I saw in the first tape my house too? What about Gia? Does she know? I was thrown into a full panic. I knew I had to get out of here and run to the next house I saw as soon as I possibly could. I turned around to begin leaving, but I froze. I saw him. Right out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. He was in my wardrobe, staring at me wide-eyed through the crack of the door. It was Mr. Ellsworth. Lately, I've been feeling drained. I haven't taken time off work in 2 years. By some miracle, we just hired someone competent enough to make some of the workload off our small department. My boss suggested I use up some vacation time. I hated flying, so that limited my options. I didn't ski, so that narrowed down my choices to almost nothing. Was there really anything local? Would I be doomed to spend 2 weeks doing nothing at my place? I started to mindlessly scroll through vacation suggestions at work. An ad for a cabin caught my eye. It was near the local ski resort, but wasn't attached to them. The photos made it look almost too good to be true. A massive cozy log cabin empty and ready, waiting in the middle of a beautiful winter forest. And the price was good. I let myself think of sitting by a warm fire, reading the backlog of books I've had piling up for years. Since I had no better ideas, I booked the cabin. By the end of the week, I had my bags packed. Driving down the one-lane forest road wasn't as troublesome as I thought it was going to be. The cabin's address wasn't on my GPS. Thankfully, the road was a straight path to my destination. I expected to see some wildfire on the way. Not even a small bird flew between the trees during the entire ride. At least it was quiet. The photos didn't do the cabin justice. It was far more breathtaking in person. I wondered how I got a location like this for so cheap. Someone had been there recently to shovel a pathway and remove the snow off the front stairs, but I didn't see any footprints. It took a few trips to haul all my bags into the place. I was glad someone maintained the walkway, or else I could have broken my neck. It was cold inside. I wasted no time turning on the heat and starting a fire. I then checked out the kitchen to make sure I had enough food for the week. I mostly packed snacks, so I might need to take a trip into town. To my shock, the pantry was stocked with a note saying I could help myself. Really, how did I get so lucky with this place? The drive hadn't been very long, and yet I collapsed on the couch in front of the fire. The years of hard work caught up to me. I made sure the fire had enough wood to keep it going for a few hours, then curled up under some heavy blankets for a short nap. My short nap turned into sleeping until the middle of the night. A noise dragged me out of my dreams. The fire had died down and my stomach hurt from hunger. I got up to get the fire started again when the noise came back. Someone was knocking at the cabin door. I froze, scared for some reason. I felt more tired than I did before my nap. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to keep away the chill. Should I answer the door? There shouldn't be any reason why someone would be in the middle of the woods at this time of the night. At first, I assumed the person who knocked was dangerous. Then I realized they could have just broken in and not knocked first. Still, I grabbed the iron fire poker before I went to the door. "Hello?" I called out.
Oh, hello. I got a bit lost. Can you tell me if there's a town nearby?
A female voice came from behind the door. My hand started to reach for the handle. Then I considered she might have a tougher male friend waiting to charge the door when my defenses were down. "Yeah, there's one down the main road," I said, wondering how she got here, if she hadn't used the only road up.
Road? Oh, I see your tire tracks. Maybe I could follow them. Hey, are you alright in there, or do you need help getting out?
She asked as if that question was normal. What the hell was she talking about? A fierce chill shot down my back. I opened my mouth to respond, but movement out of the corner of my eye caught my attention. I could see some windows in the living room from where I stood. It was still pitch dark outside. A white shape started to appear in that darkness. My heart froze as a pale face got closer to the window. The ghoulish appearance was something made of nightmares. A wide black smile pressed against the glass. The dark eyes made contact with my own. Then a loud banging came from the front door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. When I looked back, the face in the window was gone. I ran to where I left my cell phone. The thing refused to turn on. The banging still echoed through the entire cabin as my shaking hands plugged the charging cord into my phone. Still nothing. I then ran around, making sure every door was locked. As I went by the windows, I briefly saw more of those pale faces outside. What was going on? I noticed something at the top of the kitchen windows. I reached over to grab a cord. A wooden set of shutters slid out from under the wall and locked at the bottom. I'm sure if someone tried hard enough, they could get through the shutter, but at least it was an extra layer of protection. I found out all the windows had these shutters. The banging sound grew quieter each time I covered a window. I even ran upstairs to lock up the ones in the bedrooms just in case. While I raced around, I kept hearing that female voice offering help and telling me to just go outside. Like hell I would ever do that. When the last window had been covered, the noises from outside stopped. I soon found out none of the landline phones worked. My cell phone refused to turn on no matter what I tried. I was safe inside the cabin, but trapped. Could I wait out whoever, or whatever was outside? I had enough food for the week. My boss knew where I was going, so when I didn't come back, he would call the police, right? I didn't want to wait this out for a week. I wanted to get out of here now. I got the fire going again. A chill got into my body and ran down to my bones. I knew I needed to keep my strength up, so I ate some of the snacks while I sat shaking on the couch, iron fire poker within arm's reach. For some reason, I started to feel exhausted. Soon I couldn't keep my eyes open and fell asleep, even though I was still scared out of my mind. I woke up in a cold cabin. I couldn't tell what time it was. There were no clocks, and my phone was still dead. I didn't dare risk opening the shutters to see what time of day it was outside. I've never felt this cold in my life. I piled on layers of clothing. Not even the fireplace or turning the heat up to the max helped get rid of the chill. A scratchy feeling came to the back of my throat. I was getting sick on top of everything else. I needed to warm up. To my disappointment, the shower only had slightly warm water. I almost felt colder after a quick shower. My stomach churned. The snacks from the night before weren't sitting well. I tried to make a can of soup, but my body rejected it. I found my way back to the couch and under a pile of blankets. I felt awful. In the short time since I'd woken up, my health did a major downward spiral. Soon I felt too sick to do anything but sleep for another few hours. What time was it when I woke back up? I had no idea. A soft knocking sound made me stir. I heard a low voice but couldn't make out what they were saying. Slowly I started towards the door. My body hurt too much from fever and chills to pick up my weapon.
You need to get out of there.
The female voice from before whispered.
Come out here. I'll help you.
I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. Don't lie. I know you have others with you. I hissed, my voice raspy from the illness.
Others? Is that what you saw? You sound awful. I don't know if you'll last more than a day or so inside there.
What was she talking about? Was she suggesting that, somehow, I was sick because I was inside the cabin? No, she was just trying to say anything to get me outside. But still, I wanted to trust her because I was scared. I crept to the nearest window to unlock the shutter. I opened it just enough to see out of. My eyes hurt from the blinding snow outside. When they adjusted to the light, I started to scan the trees looking for any signs of the creatures from last night. There weren't any tracks in the snow. Had I just been seeing things? A dark shape moved from between the trees, then another. More appeared somehow aware I was looking outside. Within seconds, countless twisted and misshapen human forms started to come from the forest. Some were dragged behind the bodies of animals they killed, the monsters' mouths covered with blood. If I went outside, I would be eaten next. Suddenly a human face appeared just outside the window. A young woman with green eyes and red hair smiled at me. For a moment the fear left. She looked so friendly I almost considered going outside with her. Then her wide smile started to get wider. I slammed the shutter down, locking it. I didn't know what those monsters were, or why they hadn't gotten inside yet. For now, I was safe inside the cabin. The horrors were outside, and they needed to stay like that. The girl pleaded with me to come outside. I tried to ignore her. The illness started to get worse. Soon I found myself unable to stand for long. I once again made my way to my safe space on the couch. My mind was muddled with a sudden fever, making it impossible to think. Before I passed out, I heard the girl outside speak once more.
I'll somehow get you out here.
How long did I sleep? I didn't know. I couldn't move. My throat hurt. My body hurt. I could barely keep my eyes open. Was this how I died? Alone in the middle of nowhere? I didn't even like cabins, so why did I come here? I could have read all those books at home. Another banging noise woke me. This time it was different. I also smelled smoke. But I didn't remember the last time I got up to add the fire. A burst of energy came to my body as I stood up, trying to understand what was happening. To my horror, I saw smoke pouring out from through the shutters. I quickly realized the cabin was on fire. The flames hadn't reached inside yet, but if I didn't get out soon, I would die from the smoke. I coughed, the air quickly becoming dense. I started to make my way to the front door, but then my body stopped. For some reason, I couldn't control my actions. A groaning sound came from the walls. It almost sounded like a scream. Tears stung my eyes as I was forced to watch my body move away from freedom. I ended up in the kitchen. Someone else was there. It was hard to see her full features because of the thick air. She was coughing as well.
Come on, you'll die in here.
She shouted. The back door had been busted open. She held a large hammer in her hand, showing how she'd gotten in. I took a few steps closer, but my hand moved on its own. In one swift motion, I grabbed a knife off the counter and attacked her with it. She backed up but still sliced a deep cut across her left eye. I wanted to stop. I didn't want to hurt her. Blood flowed from her wound into the floor. For some reason, the wood absorbed the liquid, leaving no traces.
Sorry about this,
she said and raised the hammer. The last thing I remember inside that cabin was a shock of pain against my temple. I woke up again, cold and throat raw. My body refused to stop shaking, but the fever was gone. I was very weak. For some odd reason, I sat in my car, the cabin in front fully engulfed in flames. A screaming sound came from the building, and I could have sworn I saw a burst of dark smoke come from the flames flying off deep into the woods.
I called the police. Just hold on till then.
I looked over to see the redhead taking off her jacket to wrap it around my shaking body. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. She helped me get a sip of water from a bottle she brought along. Her left eye closed from the wound I had given her. I'm sorry, I croaked.
Don't worry about it. My eye is fine, and I'll have a neat scar,
she replied with a smile. The cabin, I started, then coughed.
Yeah, it was draining your life force and stuff like that. I'm glad I got you out in time. You'll recover in a few weeks. Anyway, I gotta go. Later, Gator.
I couldn't stop her. I wanted to thank her, or to find out her name, but she left not wanting to stick around for when the police showed up. I was admitted to the hospital. When I was able, there was a round of questioning. I didn't have a lot of answers. There was a shell of a burned down cabin, but there hadn't been any registered in the area. The road that led to the cabin disappeared before the police showed up. It was a miracle they got through the woods to find me. I said I had rented the cabin through an online ad, but there hadn't been any change on my credit card, and I couldn't find the ad again. They were puzzled, but lacked any clues to go forward. I've heard whispers that people had started to disappear inside those woods. A few years ago, 2 bodies had been found inside the shell of a house that should not have been in the forest. They had been within walking distance of a town. No one understood why they let themselves starve to death inside an abandoned home. I needed a few weeks off work to recover. At least my boss was good about it. I was thankful I had lived through the worst vacation anyone could ever take, but not having answers bothered me. I really wanted to thank that strange girl who saved me. I wanted to tell my story mostly to warn others there was something unnatural lurking off in the forest. There are some dark things in this world, and there are some decent people too. Let's hope you never come across darkness without some light appearing to guide your way out. I looked down at the creaky basement stairs trailing off into a void of darkness. I tried to swallow, but my throat wouldn't let me. I was too afraid. My grandmom's house was a mostly pleasant place to me, all except the basement, that is. The basement was old and smelled of mildew and dust. The stairs leading down were the wooden ones that have gaps behind each stair, which only amplified the feeling that when you walked down, something would grab you from underneath. There were 3 singular lights down there that had to be turned on with pull cords, so you had to go down into the near complete darkness to turn them on. I stood at the top of the stairs, my childhood imagination running wild with thoughts of monsters in the darkness. I knew I had to go down. Both my grandparents were disabled, so it had to be me to go bring up the things from the freezer my grandmom needed. I knew the very real risk of one of them injuring themselves down there greatly outweighed my fear of things that lurk in the dark. I took a deep, shaky breath and ran down the stairs as fast as I could and sprinted towards the first light. Click. The dim light buzzed softly with electricity as it came to life. It only illuminated about a 4-foot circle around me. I looked around at the old workbench and all the random stuff that was down there, which did nothing but creep me out even more. There were so many dark corners for things to lurk, and the dim ring of light around me only made the rest of the darkness seem more oppressive. As I was preparing myself to run to the next light near the old fridge, suddenly I was plunged into darkness. I didn't hear a click or that distinct popping noise of a bulb dying. It was just silent. Waves of fear washed over me as my mind raced. I had to do something. I ran towards the next light, feeling invisible hands reaching for me as I moved. Click. Nothing. The lights weren't working. I pulled the chain again, keeping my eyes shut tight, just praying that when I pulled it again, I'd see a flash of light through my eyelids. But I didn't. It was dark. The only light in the basement was the subtle glow of the streetlights coming through the tiny basement windows. I told myself on repeat there was nothing there, and monsters weren't real, trying to find any shred of bravery left in me. I took a deep breath as I flung the door of the freezer open and grabbed the things my grandmom had asked me to bring up. I started turning to run back to the stairs when I heard the worst noise I could have imagined at that moment. The basement door slammed shut loudly and forcefully. Whack. No, please no. I scrambled up the stairs as fast as my body would carry me and tried desperately to open the door. It wouldn't budge. The door didn't have a lock on it, but it did stick in the frame sometimes and was hard for even a grown adult to open, let alone a young girl. My grandparents never closed it for exactly that reason. Grandmom? Grandpa? Someone please open the door. I dropped everything I was holding and violently shook the door handle as hard as I could. I yanked and pulled on it desperately, but it didn't move. The door opened in towards the basement, so ramming myself into it wasn't an option. But truthfully, I wasn't strong enough to unstick the door, let alone bash my way through it. Then a horrible thought crept into my mind. The door faced inward. There was no draft at all, let alone one strong enough to have done that. Someone had to have slammed it like that, from inside the basement. Then I remembered just to the left of the fridge was the cellar door that led to the outside, but I'd have to go all the way across the basement to get there. I sat for a moment with my head against the door and my back scrunched tightly against the wall, trying to figure out what to do when I heard a noise from below. Shh. It was just a quiet little scuffle, like someone dragging something across the concrete floor, but it sounded like it was directly below me. I froze as I listened. And then there it was again. It sounded like it was moving from under the stairs towards the bottom step. I was shaking so violently, if someone had seen me, they probably would have thought I was having a seizure. Maybe I was. I don't really know. Grandmom? Grandpa? Please open the door. I slammed my fists as hard as I could against the door. From below me I heard the same sound growing closer. Please. I slammed my fists so hard I had long, colorful bruises on them for over a week after. I'm truthfully amazed I didn't break any bones in my hands. As I heard the noise again, I turned my head towards the bottom of the stairs. I thought for a second I could make out the outline of some tall, lanky, dark figure hunched over just past the stairs, but beginning to stand up in the darkness below. In that moment, the purest form of fight or flight took over my body. It was almost like being possessed by someone else, someone far braver and smarter than me. Before I could have any more thoughts, I launched myself through the gap in the railing onto the concrete floor. I hit the ground hard, but I had too much adrenaline to carry. I heard some kind of deep, raspy, inhuman groan coming from behind me as I got back onto my feet and started running towards the cellar doors. I could hear whatever it was, joints crackling and popping as it shuffled towards me, making that awful dragging noise. I didn't dare turn around to see it. As I finally reached the little stairs leading to freedom, I slammed my shoulder as hard as I could against the cellar doors. They were heavy and barely moved at all when I slammed into them, but I knew this was life or death. I wedged myself between the top step and one side of the doors and pushed myself against the door up with all the strength I had in me. I heard the raspy groan growing closer and louder. I pushed the door as hard as I could until I could see the backyard. I felt something unnaturally cold and bony swipe against my leg as I fell out onto the ground. GatorSwampWitch? I heard my grandmom say in a completely confused voice from over by the pond. Honey, what are you doing? The basement, the door, slammed shut. I panted, my mind still racing. As the comfort of adults being with me again started to melt the fear off me, I gained enough courage to look down the cellar steps. For just a moment, I saw something slink away back into the darkness. It looked pale and bony and just wrong. I saw a singular bloodshot eye that was far too big and wide with no iris as it vanished into the darkness. As soon as that eye connected sight with mine, the fear returned, and I slammed the door shut aggressively. "Baby, what are you doing? Are you okay?" My grandmom started to make her way over to me with a look of grave concern on her face. "What happened to you?" I looked down at myself. I was covered in dust and dirt, bleeding in a few places. The side of my body that hit the basement floor when I jumped off the stairs was covered in scraps with purple bruises beginning to form underneath. The sides of my fists were swollen and already beginning to change colors from banging so hard against the door. After I gained my composure for a moment, I looked at my grandmom's sweet, concerned face. The basement door slammed shut on me and I thought I thought something else was down there. I was yelling for you guys, but no one answered me. I knew as I was saying it she wasn't going to believe me that something was down there. I shook my head and covered my face in my hands. "I'm so sorry, honey. We came outside to feed the fish when you went down. Can't hear anything from out here. Not at our age, anyway." She smiled playfully but dropped her smile once she realized how shaken up I really was. "The dark can play tricks on your mind sometimes. That's probably all it was." She smiled again and rubbed her hand against my back gently. "Why don't you go inside and get yourself washed up, and we'll watch a movie when we're done out here? Maybe some ice cream?" I walked inside from the back of the house so I wouldn't have to go past the basement. As I was washing all the dirt off myself and cleaning up my scrapes, I heard the distinct pop of the basement door on sticking, followed by the slow creak of the hinges. I froze in place, listening to every possible sound. It was quiet. I peeked my head out the little window to see both of my grandparents were still outside by the pond. The bathroom was in the same hallway as basement door, so I got on the ground and looked under the crack of the door. I couldn't see much, but I could see that the basement door was wide open now, and a few of the things I had dropped sitting on the steps. I didn't see movement, and I couldn't hear the grotesque raspy groans of crackling or that thing moving. I opened the door slowly, trying not to make a sound, and stepped into the hallway. I inched closer towards the steps, keeping my eyes fixed on the black void in the basement. Nothing was there. I slid my way past the open basement door into the kitchen to grab a flashlight. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it all around into the dark basement. Still nothing. By some miracle, none of the things I dropped fell off the stairs and were all still between the first and third steps. "It's all in your head. Grandmom is right. Nothing was there. You're okay," I told myself, keeping the flashlight fixed towards the steps. I knelt down as far back from the actual basement as I could to grab the things I dropped. Just as I was about to grab the last item, I heard a dishearteningly familiar sound. A slow, dragging shuffle combined with popping and cracking. Not from the basement, from behind me. I turned my head towards the hallway and then felt the life force drain out of me as my eyes once again met those horrible, irisless, bloodshot eyes. Whatever it was tall and thin, covered in semi-translucent pale flesh that seemed like it was draped over the thing's skeleton. It didn't seem like it was attached in any meaningful way. Its arms and torso were both too long and skinny. So were its horrible bony fingers with black rotten nails. And its face. Its face. Two bulging bloodshot eyes that were too close together with tiny black dots in the middle. A long, thin mouth with no lips that were just parted enough to reveal what seemed to be rows of thin, yellow-orange, needle-like teeth. It seemed to have no expression on its face, but looking at it pierced through my soul with hopelessness. It looked like the result of a mad scientist trying to combine an emaciated human-alien hybrid with an anglerfish or something horrible like that. Fear once again took over. I tried to scream, but instead my mouth just hung open silently. I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed, kneeling on the floor, just staring at this thing. It slowly began to move towards me, making those horrible noises. The way it moved was unnatural. It was almost like when you're watching someone move in a strobe light, disjointed, like it was teleporting a few inches at a time more than walking with its legs, despite the noises it made as it moved. It was within a few feet of me as it began reaching out towards me with its horrible twisted fingers. As it reached out to touch me, my body abruptly released me from fear paralysis, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't know I was capable of making a noise like that. I screamed so loud I seemed to startle the thing for a second. It paused before turning its head 180 degrees with a sickening crunch to face the back door. I heard the door fly open, and my grandparents both calling my name with almost as much fear as I had. The thing let out a wailing, groaning scream, for lack of a better word, and fled back into the basement. As I sat there shaking like a leaf, I saw my grandparents standing at the end of the hallway. What? I'd never seen my grandparents look scared before. My grandmom rushed towards me with a quickness I didn't know she was capable of. She quickly ushered me out of the house as she yelled to my grandfather, directing him to go back out the door. "Call the police now." I don't remember most of the rest of the night. My grandparents rushed me outside, and we all stood in their driveway and waited for them to arrive. It felt like hours to me, but it was probably less than 10 to 20 minutes before they arrived. They searched the whole house and yard, but they found nothing. When they asked us all for details about what we saw, my grandparents said it was a tall, skinny, naked, hairless man they'd seen run down into the basement. But I knew it wasn't a man. It wasn't human. I didn't tell the police that, though. I knew no adult would really take me seriously if I explained the full extent of everything. I didn't want this to be dismissed as a child's overactive imagination, even if my grandparents had seen it too. I just told the police the basement door slammed shut. I thought I heard someone down there, and then saw someone in the hallway when I went to pick the things back up. I think some part of me just didn't really want to relive the whole thing again either. They did a full investigation of the basement, the house, searched the surrounding neighborhood and woods, but nothing ever came of it as far as anyone told me. Thankfully, less than 6 months later, my grandparents ended up moving to a retirement home that was closer to our house, and I never had to go down into that basement again. But I will never forget what happened that night. I still sleep with the lights on a lot of the time, and I do everything in my power to avoid having any dark or open spaces behind me. I hate to admit that, but I'd rather people think I'm scared than ever have to see that thing again. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe again for the rest of my life. It's been more than 15 years since it happened, but some part of me will always be on edge, waiting for my gaze to meet those horrible eyes again. Congrats, Mr. Wooten. You're hired. Come in Monday morning and we will give you orientation, said the ecstatic voice on the phone. Thank God. My unemployment had just ran out and bills were coming due. I needed a job. It sure was difficult finding one too. You see so many nobody wants to work complaints, but hardly anyone is hiring. I laid out a first day business casual outfit, trimmed my beard, and awaited. I pulled into the parking lot the following morning to meet an enthusiastic HR rep. She led me to my supervisor, Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, I want to introduce you to your newest employee, Mr. Wooten, she said as she waved me a goodbye to leave me with my new superior. Hello, Mr. Wooten. We're so excited to have you here. Let me show you your cubicle and show you what you will be doing. He walked me to my desk area and showed me countless training videos. Basically, I would be working in the customer service department for a blue-collar company that manufactures hubs for some of the nation's largest automotive companies. Sounds great, right? If you will, kindly log into your email and read your introduction email, and come see me if you have any questions, he said as he walked off. I logged on the computer and read the email. Hello, new employee. We here at Redacted look forward to having you as a team player in supplying hubs to our great customers. We take great pride in our product, but also in our commitment to maintaining a positive work ethic. In your work desk, there is a copy of our standards and rules. We have a very strict code of conduct, but I'm sure you will agree it is for the best. While we do understand it is difficult to remember all the rules, we encourage you to study them frequently. Make flashcards if you must. If you have any questions regarding the rules, please contact your supervisor, who will be happy to elaborate. Unfortunately, we have a strict no rehire policy. Thank you. Axel Sharp, Plant Manager. There was also a link in the email that showed me a cartoon umpire do a 3-strike count, and then a lumberjack hit a man with an axe. It was hilarious, as it was extremely pixelated like an old video game. Well, that's what's interesting. I figured I may as well thumb through the book. A lot of the rules made sense. Rule 7. We do not discuss politics in the workplace. Rule 22. While it is okay to talk sports, the conversation must end before arguments arise. Rule 31. No personal cell phone use while not on break. And then some of them were odd. Rule 45. Keep an extra change of clothes in your locker should you have a spill. Rule 1. Always keep a smile on your face. This helps keep the rest of the rules easier and boosts everyone's mood. Strange, I thought. I did consult with my supervisor, and he assured me that the rules are a lot, but they are for the betterment of the company. That accidents do happen, and rules do get broke. After 2 strikes, a consultation with the plant manager happens. 3 is a termination. Strikes came off after a year of incident, which I thought was harsh. He also reminded me to fix my shirt as it was becoming untucked. The following weeks were going okay. I was getting a hang of the job. The pay was decent and I had made a couple commissions. We were called for a mandatory plant meeting. In walked the plant manager. Mr. Sharp was a very tall and stout man. He is built like a tank and had some python-like arms. He was wearing a red flannel tucked into his khakis. Well, thank you for coming in, crew. As many of you know, we always have a meeting regarding employees getting terminated. However, there is a new employee. Will you say hello to the family, Mr. Wooten? He winked. I gave a generous smile and waved to the room. Thank you, Mr. Wooten. Now, we are going to bring in Mr. Butler into the room and refresh everyone on our rule policy. Bring him in, Mr. Inning. A short man wearing a Dodgers hat. Hats were okay on Fridays. Brought in a man duct taped to a chair. The man was bleeding and bruised and sniffling. I recognized him. That was Mr. Jinx. He was one of the blue-collar guys that ran the CNC equipment. On August 4th, Mr. Jinx microwaved salmon in the break room, breaking Rule 17. The crowd booed. On October 19th, he was 1 minute late clocking in. Need I remind everyone? Please give yourself extra time to get here. Our attendance policy doesn't allow tardiness. Rule 2, and finally, he jammed his finger today while operating equipment and used a swear word. Breaking Rule 11. You guys know what we do. Axe 'em, my coworkers yelled in unison. I sat there nervously as I felt a pit in my stomach. Inning handed Sharp an axe, and with one swift motion, Mr. Jinx's head was rolling towards me. I screamed and began to faint, hearing Mr. Inning yell, "Wooten, strike one." I awoke in the nurse's office with a cold towel on my head and a ginger ale in my hand. "Welcome back," I heard from Mr. Hatch. "Thought we lost you there a second." "I need to go home," I said as I tried to stand up. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Wooten," he said coy-like. "You wouldn't want to get 2 strikes on the same day. You already got one from Rule 18, making a disturbance. Here, let me help you up. Go change your clothes and get back to your station." I worked the rest of the day and looked through the book again. Rule 100, no quitting. Rule 87, no whistleblowing to outside sources. Rule 49, no coming to work sick. You get 1 sick day after a year. Rule 99, no unionizing. Talks of unionizing, gathering outside of the workplace. Rule 27, mandatory overtime is a termination automatically if missed. The next few months I was doing okay. I went to several more axings. I even cheered with my coworkers. I reminded people to smile and clean their appearance. But then one day, I got strike 2 for taking too long of a bathroom break. Rule 61. I was brought into a meeting room with Sharp, Inning, and Hatch. "Mr. Wooten, we're here to discuss your disciplinary actions. As you are aware, we have a rule book for a reason. You've broken 2 rules and you've still got 7 months until the first one comes off. I don't want to remind you, but you've seen the meetings. You've seen the axings. Good help is hard to come by, and we can't keep employees because you guys think you can do what you want." "Mr. Sharp, if I may," I tried to ask. He waved his finger. "You need to understand how serious our rules are, but I will let you explain. Why were you in the bathroom for 3 additional minutes?" "I'm not sick, but my stomach is upset. You see, I had this turkey sandwich, and it didn't agree with me. I'm so embarrassed, and I'm sorry." Mr. Inning piped up. "Maybe you could fast rather than eat on company time. That would be a true team player, and it would save you from getting tummy aches." "Excellent idea, Mr. Inning," said Sharp. "Now Hatch is going to discipline you here. Will you remove your shirt, please?" My shirt?" I asked. "Yes, the next 3 minutes won't be a rule-breaking time. Please refrain from profanity to the best of your ability." I removed my shirt and Inning held my hand. "1 more strike and you're out." Hatch came up with a branding iron that was red hot and stuck it to my chest. I screamed at the intense pain I was feeling as tears rolled down my cheeks. Inning quickly covered my mouth and grinned. They beat me a couple minutes. At the end of the period, Sharp looked satisfied. "Well, I feel this was a productive meeting. I think Mr. Wooten here will remember his lesson and not break any more rules. Plus, he is showing his company pride." He was referring to the company logo that was burned into my skin. Nearly a year from my initial strike was almost up. I had seen 20 axings. I worked overtime, missed family gatherings to attend family functions, and was even leaving the house very early to make sure I had an extra hour in the parking lot so I wouldn't be late. But some things are out of control. A traffic jam, a city bus had flipped on its side and blocked the road. I took back roads, sped but was caught by a trooper going 20 over. After a stern talking to and a ticket, I sped off again once I knew he was gone. A school bus stopped to let kids off, but I ran past it. I ran stoplights and cut off a few cars. I made it to the parking lot and looked at my clock. 1 minute late. 1 minute late. That's strike 3. I saw the security guard point at me and, on his siren, yell for me to come in, but I U-turned out. I just made it past the gate before it could pin my car in. I heard Inning yell at the guard, "You let him get away. That's strike 1 for you." HR has all my info. They know where I live. I drove past my apartment to see the security guard waiting by my door the following day. The only choice I have now is to run. I won't share where I'm at. You never know where internal affairs are. It started with an accident. A tiny one. My heel striking the curb at just the wrong angle, twisting the bones till they popped. The doctors wrote it off as a minor strain, sent me home with a pat on the back and a script for painkillers. It was my brother, a math major, who pointed out the coincidence. So it happened at the intersection of 1st and 28th Street, on the 128th day of the year. Freaky. He waggled his eyebrows at me. What time did it happen? I'd taken a late lunch, worked a bit in the cafe before heading back to the office, gotten back shortly before 1:30 p.m. His eyebrows flattened. Seriously? Weird. I didn't think it was weird. I would have forgotten about the incident completely if it hadn't been for what happened 2 months later. I'd only lost my focus for a second. Normally not an issue, unless you're behind the wheel on the interstate with a four-wheeler pummeling in your direction. I'd wrenched the wheel, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision. I veered over to the shoulder and waited for the smell of burnt rubber to leave my nostrils. When I chanced to look at the dashboard clock, it read 1:28 p.m. I twisted around just in time to see the four-wheeler disappearing around a bend in the highway. Its license plate? FYU 128. That night, I made a list. Accidents, mistakes, plain bad luck. The time I sublexed my patella on the soccer field in 3rd grade, or got trapped on a roller coaster for 6 hours following a park-wide power outage. The time I learned I qualified for a full-ride university scholarship the day before the paperwork was due. The little things. Misplaced valuables, cracked iPhones, unpleasant surprises on tax day. Didn't need much. They might have happened on 128, or in the 128th house on the street. The only college class I had to retake held its final exam in classroom 128. Which might explain how I failed a test I'd spent 6 weeks studying for. The bigger ones, bad breakups, terminal medical diagnosis, deaths in the family, seemed to need a confluence of symmetries, date aligning with time or address or coordinates. The greater the influence, the worse the outcomes seemed to be. My friends always joked that I was unlucky, a lightning rod for misfortune, but it wasn't that at all. I was being targeted. I rang up my brother. He might as well have been sitting across from me for how clearly I could read his expression of concern. Targeted? By who? Do you remember the day Dad died? It took him a second to process the emotional whiplash. Yeah, but what? It was January 28th. I called the hospital. Guess what room number he was in? Aaron. I surged on, determined to get my story out before he had me committed. I'm just saying, You hear some numbers are more common in the universe than others, some weird quirk of nature that nobody really understands, or people see the same number over and over and claim it has some spiritual significance, like angel numbers, or the Fibonacci sequence, or Benford's Law, or schizophrenia, he suggested. Shut up. Here's my theory. There are entities, intelligences, whatever you want to call them, that express their will under certain conditions. In my case, the appearance of a specific sequence of numbers. Just pretend for a second that it's possible. What would you do? I'd roll over and wait to die. Statistically speaking, there's no way to avoid a number. Numbers are the blueprint for everything, you see. They're the language of nature. He stopped himself, realizing too late that he'd allowed himself to get swept up in the intellectual exercise. He cleared his throat. But this isn't about reality. This is about your perception of it. What do you mean? Well, let's take the accident. Do you remember how fast you were driving? I don't know, 80? Do you know how many kilometers per hour that is? I felt a chill walk slowly down my spine. Exactly. And if you wanted to take it further, how many times do you see a 128-degree angle, or read the 128th page in a book? The point is, you're not aware of these instances, so you don't experience any bad luck. And anything that is affected by your perception, not the undeniable fact of reality, has to originate inside your head. Or, I suggested, you just made it easier for it to find me. As I stared at my phone, a pop-up alerted me that the 49ers had won by a landslide score of 1-28. My weather app notified me that it was raining again, coming up on 1.28 inches of rain. I had a missed robocall. 128-555-3647. I was still staring at the screen when lightning split the sky in two. A freak accident. That's what the news outlets called it. Vox did an article about it. You might still be able to find it floating around the internet somewhere. They called me the girl who lived through lightning, but that's not really true. The lightning didn't hit me. It hit the roof, cracking the house open like an egg and spilling singed shingles all over the front lawn. I knew I couldn't stop coincidence. I couldn't avoid the manifestation of this thing, this entity, any more than I could stop the march of time. But I could try. My brother was right. If I didn't know when the door was open, it couldn't come in to greet me. I destroyed all the clocks in the house, defaced too many books to count, and burnt the offending pages. Then I booked a last-minute flight to somewhere I was unlikely to find a clock or license plate. There are precious few of those places left. I should probably explain why I'm writing this. At this moment, I'm sitting on the plane as it descends through the dense black clouds. Thank God for in-flight Wi-Fi, or what could very well be my last words would be lost. I'm scared. I feel the vice enclosing me, an incredible pressure building. We're finally breaking our holding pattern. Well, it circled in the sky, waiting for the storm to clear. A flight that was supposed to touch down well before midnight on January 27th altered its arrival date to January 28th. We're approaching 12,800 feet, and I can't stop staring at the little screen in front of me, announcing the latest update to our flight details. Our estimated landing time is 1:28. Wish me luck. Please.